My mother-in-law, Margaret, and I were stuck in an elevator. Frankly, I was glad it was a chance to be alone with her, away from everyone else. Margaret seemed to sense something too. She was looking at me strangely, as if she could sense my thoughts, as if she knew exactly what was going on in my head. There was a tension in the air that I couldn't quite pick up on, but I could definitely feel it. I've always liked her. She's a lovely woman, very classy, and I think she's a genuinely nice person. She holds herself gracefully, is always impeccably dressed, and there's something about her presence that draws me in. But how do I deal with this delicate subject? I'm afraid to approach her, not knowing how she'll react. What if I cross a line where there's no end to it? And then there's my wife, Anna. The risk kept my mind racing. It wasn't just what Margaret might think, but the consequences if Anna ever found out. My heart raced as I weighed the risk and the desire that was growing inside me. But women are always flattered. I had no doubt about that. I'd experienced it myself so many times. A pertinent compliment, a lingering glance, it was often enough to let me know what was on my mind. Margaret is wonderful and very kind, and here we were, locked together with no distractions and nowhere to go. 10 minutes later, we heard footsteps on the stairs. Someone was coming, or maybe not. We didn't talk or yell or call for help. We're not children. We just looked at each other, silently, as if words were unnecessary. Our eyes were closed, and there was something electric in the air between us, some unspoken understanding. I noticed Margaret's skin not like a young girl's, but without deep wrinkles. It was soft, elegant, which made her even more attractive. There were a few fine lines near her eyes, but they gave her face character, made it look wise and experienced. My gaze slid to the underside of her neck, lingering on the graceful curve of her collarbones. "You can't always wrap yourself in a shawl," she said with a smile, her voice soft but teasing. I assured her that it wasn't necessary, that she was beautiful just the way she was. She liked what I said. There was no doubt about it. Her eyes sparkled and her lips curved into a smile that made my pulse quicken. The tension between us was building with each passing second, and I could feel the air thickening around us. There was silence. The sight of Margaret excited me, her presence filling the small space, her scent intoxicating. Every day my desire to be near her grew. I could see that Margaret was agitated, her breathing ragged, her eyes giving away what she couldn't hide. This was the opportunity I had waited so long for. I knew I would dare, and I dared. Slowly, carefully, I pressed Margaret against the elevator wall, my heart pounding in my chest. She shivered at first, eyes wide, but I pushed her again, more insistently this time, and my hands touched her arms. She resisted for a while, but then I saw a change in her eyes, a softening, an acceptance. After all, women are often helpless in situations like this. She liked to pretend she wasn't interested, but I could feel it the way she nestled against me. Her breathing quickened, eyes half closed, lips ajar, wanting more. We took a breath and adjusted our clothes, the tension still hanging in the air. It was only then that I realized I heard someone coming. My heart raced and I stepped back, trying to pull myself together. Luckily, I made it in time. It was the construction foreman. He had gotten a call from a neighbor about a stuck elevator. He opened the door and looked at us, wondering why we hadn't called for help or knocked on the wall. I shrugged, trying to feign calm, but Margaret said nothing. She looked blankly at him and walked out of the elevator without saying a word, her expression calm and unperturbed. I stared after her as she walked away. I had nothing to hide, and I didn't care who knew what had just happened. "Why didn't Margaret come out earlier?" Anna asked me later when we got home. I complained. "Ask your mom." My answer was vague, and Anna seemed to leave it at that, although I couldn't help feeling guilty. I realized I was playing a dangerous game, but the excitement of it was too great to resist. Half an hour later, Margaret returned with the groceries. She put the things on the table, her expression calm and collected, as if nothing had happened. There was no awkwardness between us, which amazed me. She did well. I was amazed at her restraint, her ability to act as if nothing had happened, as if we hadn't just shared a moment that had gone over the top. We sat at the table and drank tea. Anna was saying something, but I wasn't paying attention. My thoughts were occupied with something else. My gaze kept shifting to Margaret, to the way her dress hugged her figure, and the neckline teased enough to make me want more. Everyone else seemed to notice nothing, fiddling with their cups and talking, but I couldn't focus on anything but Margaret. I wanted to do it again. I was exhausted, but my desire was stronger. Where could I go? How could I make it happen again? The elevator. What else could I think of? It was the easiest thing in the world. I don't know. All I knew was that I wanted her and had to find a way to be alone with her again. Later that night, Margaret caught my gaze from across the room. A fleeting smile, a knowing look that made my heart race. She knew. She wanted this too. I could see it in her eyes, in the way her gaze lingered on mine, in the way she seemed to be waiting for something. The risk, the mystery, the thrill, it was all here, beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to erupt again. And I knew that somehow we would find ourselves again in a situation where nothing would matter but the two of us, alone and lost in the intensity of our desires. The next morning I woke up with a sense of determination. I had to see Margaret alone. I had to find a way to create another opportunity. Anna was busy in the kitchen preparing breakfast and Margaret was in the garden watering the flowers. I watched her from the window. Her movements were graceful, her dress swaying slightly in the wind. It was then that I made my decision. I walked outside, trying to act casual, but my heart was pounding in my chest. "Need help?" I asked, my voice steady despite the confusion reigning inside me. Margaret raised her head, her eyes met mine, and for a moment there was that same electric tension between us. She smiled and held out the watering can to me. "Sure," she said, her voice soft. I took the watering can from her, and our fingers touched for a moment. The touch gave me a shiver, and I knew she felt it too. We stood side by side, watering the flowers, and the silence between us was thick with unspoken words. "Last night," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't stop thinking about it." Margaret looked at me, her eyes widened, and then she looked away, and a faint blush colored her cheeks. "We don't have to," she said, her voice trembling, but there was no conviction in her words. I stepped closer. My hand touched her arm and my fingers lingered on hers. "But I want to," I said, my voice firm. Margaret looked up at me, her eyes searching mine, and for a moment it seemed as if time had stopped. The world around us faded, and it was just the two of us, the tension, the desire, the need. "Not here," she whispered, glancing toward the house. I nodded, understanding. We couldn't risk it, not with Anna so close. But the look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't the end. We would find a way. Somehow we would make it happen again. And as I stood there watching her walk away, I knew this was just the beginning. The thrill, the risk, the secrecy, it was all too intoxicating to let go.